All right, well, hello, and thank you everyone for joining us for this evening's artist talk for the Velocity of a Page exhibition. My name is Janelle Hazard. I see many familiar faces, but some names that I'm not familiar with, and you may know that I am the new Executive Director and Curator at Greater Reston Arts Center. I am honored to graciously take the leadership baton from the brilliant Lily Siegel, Grace's former executive director, and I am absolutely thrilled to lead the organization into its next exciting chapter. Who knew that the first iteration of this chapter would be a full focus on the digital age? This is a unique time for all arts organizations, and I have to say that the silver lining is, at least for me personally, is that there's been a sense of increased intimacy and connection with my peers, whether that's family, friends, art colleagues, community organizations. There's this underlying beauty that all of us are rallying together to navigate through this moment, and in return, I think we've developed a better sense of appreciation for one another. So the Velocity of a Page exhibition was originally scheduled to be on view in our physical gallery starting this week, and we are so pleased to still be able to share this collection of work and transition it to a virtual multi-platform exhibition where guest curator Christopher Kardambikis, who you will hear from shortly, has hand-selected works to appear on both our website and our social media platforms. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, please be sure to visit our website, our Instagram. There are specific works on each platform that he has hand-selected, and both platforms are refreshed each day and are activated. So there's a lot of great bookworks and paperworks to check out. We are very thankful to Christopher and the artists for coming together and helping us convert this show to an online format. And what seemed to be sort of short notice, this is our first virtual exhibit and our very first virtual program in the history of Greater Reston Arts Center. So it's a pretty big deal for us, and we hope you enjoy what's in store for this evening. This program is generously supported by our longtime local partner, Reston Community Center. I saw Sherry here from RCC. She's their arts education director. I also want to take a moment to thank our board members. I know Robert is here, Robert Gowdy, who's our fantastic, incredible board chair. Do we have any other board members present this evening? I see Janet, Dan. Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us. We're very thankful for your support, your guidance, and leadership. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Sarah Behrens, who's our Education and Public Programs Manager, to introduce tonight's program. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Janelle. Before I talk about our upcoming programs and I introduced Christopher, I wanted to just go over a few general housekeeping notes for this evening's talk. These were notes that were in the email that you were all sent as well with tonight's Zoom link. So upon entering this Zoom meeting, you should have been automatically muted, and we kindly request that you keep your microphone off during the presentation to help us facilitate a clear presentation between the event speakers. And although your audio will be turned off, we would still love to see you. So if you have a camera and are comfortable with this option, please do keep your video on. During the presentation, we encourage you to type any questions you might have for the speakers into the chat feature. At the end of the talk, we will open it up for a question and answer portion by reading those questions submitted. And you can also use the raise hand feature in the Zoom room, and we will call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question directly. And finally, this event will be recorded. We're recording now, so if you would not like to be included in the recording but wish to listen to the talk, simply keep your microphone and camera off for the duration of the event. I believe that Janelle mentioned we have a couple of upcoming programs. Next Thursday, May 14th at 6 p.m., we will hear from Sarah Osborne-Bender, who is here. She's the head of Library Technical Services at the National Gallery of Art, and she's also a specialist in artist books. That will be for our Insights program. And the following week, on Thursday, May 21st at 6 p.m., we will have artist Rex Delif-Karen, who is also here tonight, give a creative response. And all of these programs are free to attend, thanks again to the support of Reston Community Center. If you're interested in attending any of these, please send an email to info@restonarts.org, as you did to obtain this Zoom login information. So I will now introduce Christopher Kardambikis, who is our guest curator for the Velocity of a Page exhibition. Christopher explores space, process, and narrative through books, prints, and drawings. A bibliophile and zinester, Christopher founded Paper Cuts, a podcast and publishing platform that documents the contemporary world of zines and artist publications as an excuse to talk to people about the books they make. He received his BFA from Carnegie Mellon University and MFA from the University of California, San Diego. In the fall of 2016, Christopher joined the faculty at George Mason University as an assistant professor and the director of Navigation Press. So welcome, Christopher, Leah, Kyle, and Julia.
Thanks. So once again, just wanted to thank everyone for being here and for joining us for this first talk associated with the Velocity of a Page. And before you get started, I do just want to thank Grace again for putting in a tremendous amount of effort in a really short notice to take this exhibit that, again, was supposed to be shown in their beautiful space in the gallery, and to transform this into this online exhibit. So Janelle and Erica, thank you for spearheading this. Sophia, thank you so much for building out the website and for making everything read and look really great. And Sarah, thank you for putting this program together and for organizing everything that's coming up. For those of you who have not had a chance to check out the website, the Velocity of a Page does collect book arts, publications, and bookish objects as kind of a cross-section of contemporary practices across the US. Tonight, we're really lucky to have 3 artists joining us: Leah Mackin, Julia Arredondo, and Kyle Quinn. I'll introduce everyone by reading their bios, and then I have a few questions for all the artists themselves. And from there, we'll open it up to the audience. So please do type in questions into the chat, and we'll be able to collect them there. Otherwise, please keep your microphones muted. Thanks. First, Leah Mackin is a visual artist and educator who explores themes of reflection, response, and recreation through performative publishing projects. Mackin holds an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a BFA in printmaking and book arts from the University of the Arts. Leah is also the founder of the Internet Art Book Fair, and she is joining us from Ithaca, New York. Julia Arredondo is an artist entrepreneur who is currently concluding her MFA at Columbia College Chicago. So everyone should give her a big round of applause from the other side of your microphone. She's originally from Corpus Christi, Texas. Julia is heavily influenced by the small family-based businesses she grew up around. Formerly trained in printmaking and specializing in artistic forms of independent publishing, Julia founded Vice Versa Press and Carandera Press as her entrepreneurial debut. Julia is currently launching an independent media channel, QTVC Live, which focuses on live art sales by underrepresented makers. Julia is joining us from Chicago. Raw Meat Collective is an independent publishing house based in Brooklyn, New York. The collective was created, designed, and curated by artist Kyle Quinn and established in 2015. They work with a wide range of contemporary fine artists in all types of medium, primarily in publication, print, and fine art objects from all over the world. All books and publications within the collective are produced once and only available through Raw Meat Collective, through the involved artists independently, or through their limited stock listings. Their concepts of titles range from current political struggles sorrow and sadness, sexual awakenings, and much more. They strive to give a voice to queer and femme contemporary artists within publication and print. Kyle is joining us from New York. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. And just to get things started with our artists, as a general question for everyone, since everyone is involved with the act of publishing in different ways, I wanted to ask how you saw your role as a publisher. And I don't have anyone that I'm going to call on first. So for this question, we can be a little more conversational. Anyone feel free to jump in whenever you have an answer ready.
I'll bite. Okay, I'll bite.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I certainly consider myself to be a publisher as a maker of artist books. But I have some kind of curiosity with that term for a number of reasons. I think a lot about how I'm creating artist books under my own name, but I'm also often creating artist books or publications with other artists as collaborations. And what I've kind of identified in this term is that I'm really interested in sharing the act of publishing through a lot of my works. Generally, my works are focused on materiality and kind of like the things that make the book objects inherently kind of printy. I'm thinking a lot about the way ink sits on a page, the ephemerality of the object, historic traditions of print making and book publishing, and then thinking a lot about this kind of crossover between a digital analog publishing space. How do Julia, Zach, how do you all consider yourselves publishers?
As a way to pass the baton, thank you. I consider publishing like an act of empowerment. For me, it's a way to control the narrative around my life, around my story, and also to help other people contribute to that act of taking control of one's own narrative. So I have published other people before. I will say it's always a challenge. Working with other people in that collaborative publishing form is always a challenge, but it's always so rewarding. So publishing for me is just like being able to solidify my voice and being able to like give that empowerment to other people as a publisher. I'm going to pass the baton now.
Yeah, that's great. I tend to use Raw Meat Collective as a sort of free-form, uncensored platform. I don't take submissions normally. It's more like collaborative projects. The collective has evolved a lot. At first, it was like only myself and only work I was featuring in exhibitions. So I would show collages and photography and paintings, and then I would make a zine or a publication. And I still continue to do that. So I'll release solo works through Raw Meat Collective and as well as other artists that I feel fitting for it. I would say it does follow a theme, but it is completely open. Mostly just queer and female artists only at this point. I essentially had started working on a magazine because there's not really a New York magazine this year, but that has changed, and now we're doing like more high-end limited books.
There's something I'd like to follow up on. Leah saying that part of your practice as a publisher is sharing the act of publishing with other people. And Julia really wanted to allow people to take control of their own narrative. I feel like this is a very generous act, right? Like not just publishing people's work, but also sharing with them the ability to publish work. And as someone who has worked a lot with other people publishing and doing collaborative projects, it's nice to see them see that interest spread, I guess. And I didn't know if the three of you had experience with that as well, just seeing other people get the bug for a poor term to use in this time.
Well, I'll respond just saying it's a kind of pillar of why I'm pursuing or attempting to pursue a career in education, where I've been teaching printmaking and book arts, and am pretty passionate about sharing the knowledge that has been passed on to me from my opportunities and my education. Julia, what kind of passing? I'm going to casually pass the baton to you again, really
That's
casually.
great. I mean, I thank you for pointing that out, Christopher. I think that taking on the act of publishing is a lot of labor, and for pointing out that Leah and I are taking on a lot of maybe like femme-oriented labor when we are choosing to publish other people. Like, I know I have done that. But it's the stories that I'm interested in sharing and cultivating and solidifying are those that generally tend to be underrepresented. So I published a lot about like cultural practices that are involved with magic and things that aren't necessarily documented. That's what I have an interest in preserving. I'm going to pass the baton again to whoever on the panel.
Yeah, I would say a majority of the artists I work with or who come to me are fine artists. Most of them are only contemporary artists, and they don't know how to lay out a book. Most of them don't even know how to open a PDF, let alone send a book to a printer. And that's like nothing against them. It's just, I went to school for product design. And so I love looking at ephemera, touching objects, like touching things, and a book is like the best thing. And so if you have an artist who's like, I've been painting for 20 years and I have no idea how to show any of this work, you edit, you help them lay out, you can hire a designer, you can do that yourself. Rami Collective is only me, so I do help a lot of artists within all of that. But I give them as much free range as possible because I've just been censored so much throughout my career that I want to use it as a completely open platform, but also match aesthetic and give their work meaning and content in a base.
Yeah, thank you. I think that really does a lot of work to show just how important and how necessary the work that all of you are actually doing. And I wanted to drill down a little bit, and I have a few questions individually for everyone. So Leah, I will start with you. I would like to hear a little bit more about the Internet Art Book Fair and your work with that project, and how developing for an online forum for books and publications may have shaped your larger project, or your larger practice rather, outside of the Art Book Fair. And if you can speak a little bit about how that might have prepared you for where we're at now.
Sure. So the Internet Art Book Fair is an ongoing web-based project. It's a website. It has been live in various formats since like late 2018. It has hosted around 15 different projects. I take it on, it's really just myself, and I'm working with individual artists who have either approached me directly about a project that they were interested in hosting on, having be hosted on the site, or that I've reached out to work with. The projects take different forms, but essentially the idea is that the front page of the website, the actual landing page, when you like beep bop boop on over to the site, you get to see this artist's project for a set duration of time. So that could be anywhere from a week or a month or an hour, or kind of set into serial iterations. It's been an interesting format to explore with the proliferation of physical in-person art book fairs, which was my initial impetus, essentially, just as a book artist and as an artist and as a participant in the art world, attending artist book fairs and zine fests has always been part of how I engage with our community. I was so excited to see and experience smaller communities art book fairs under that delineation between a zine fest and an art book fair. I really just typed in the URL, saw it was available, and immediately bought this site. Now, given our current situation, it has an opportunity to take on more, but I also am facing my own personal limitations as an educator dealing with remote instruction this semester. The project that I'm focusing my energy on for this site will be an online exhibit for students specifically who've been affected by remote instruction this semester, thinking about knowing about a number of fellow professors and educators who have had to transition their coursework into, say, an online publication format. So that's what I'm currently working on with this site.
Thanks. Yeah, and I hope that we can come back to all that during the question and answer section as well.
Christopher, mentioning the question and answer section, I just wanted to remind the audience to please drop your questions into the chat. We will revisit them very shortly once we reach the question and answer section. And also, we love to see visuals from the artists. So if you have some of your books nearby that you can show the Zoom room, please do.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, my next question is for Julia. You grew up around small family businesses, and I was curious to hear you talk a little bit more about how that has shaped your work, and specifically your current project, QTBC Live.
Sure. I began making zines as definitely a way to disseminate my work and my writing, and also to make some extra money off of my artwork. And so zines was a really great vehicle for sharing my artwork, sharing my writing, and getting it circulated outside of the gallery context. It was just much more accessible for me. And so publishing was definitely an act of entrepreneurship for me before I really embraced the title of artist entrepreneur, because I consider myself an artist entrepreneur. Trying to think, I have started several small press entities, and I'm continuing to start businesses. Like, starting businesses is part of my creative process. So publishing was the beginning of that. And I like to think of, it makes me happy to know that Amazon also started as like a book entity. And so starting with publishing makes me feel super proud. Not that I think Amazon is like the company that I want to mimic, but it's just really interesting to see all these larger businesses get their start in books. As far as QTVC goes, after being in the zine circuit, like Leah was mentioning, like going to art book fairs, doing zine fairs, and meeting all these makers, all these creatives, I recognized that my community, everyone made something. And so I wanted to make a platform where I could further disseminate all of our work. We could further talk about our work, talk about making processes, talk about pricing, talk about business, because business wasn't really something that was being talked about in the art context. So that's where I stand with that.
Yeah, it's been one of the great things I've loved to see developing your practice from afar as you're starting different projects and really trying to bring the idea of entrepreneurship to the fore. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that's also part of your MFA studies as well.
It is. It is. and I've been able to study, like take formal business classes and try to really understand like what does the future of being an artist look like, especially now, not necessarily post pandemic, but in the midst of like the shifting arts market. What is that going to look like for artists who are making a living off of their work?
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say with this is that, and QTVC has also been a place during the pandemic for people who have been able to actually access artists and their work. So it's another platform that you've really made available for people.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, generate income simultaneously for not only myself, but for all these smaller makers too. It's been really interesting.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to Kyle. And Kyle, I'm really glad that you're able to talk a little bit about Rami Collective and how you're able to work with so many different artists who haven't actually made a book before. In your own practice, you have roots in painting, photography, collage, sculpture. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you got started with producing zines and publications, and if you feel like your larger studio practice has changed at all from your collaborative endeavors and running Collective.
Yeah, it has changed a lot. I have also moved a lot, so I feel like that's had a huge impact. But I went to school for graphic design and branding, and I freelanced outside of college for a couple of years, but during that I would make zines. And then I love to overwork, so I would paint, and then I would also like be designing for just different boring companies that I like won't mention. And so I was always producing work no matter what. Like I did gouache watercolors, and I would still release like poems and small zines for openings. So then when I moved to Minneapolis, I became more involved in a queer community and started hosting casual parties with my boyfriend. And we would screen print and do zines and just like screen print shirts and have this whole interaction and community. So it's sort of evolved into just artists I will continuously work with. John Hanning, Susan Carr. We have a full list of people coming up this year that are new artists. The book you're looking at currently is my second installment of a series called Live, Love, Laugh. And I've always taken photos. It was probably one of the first things I ever learned was photography. So it's 35 millimeter Polaroid and some digital photos from this year. It all has to be made within the year it's printed. And it follows a set number of pages. It's mostly viewed as like a self-help. But I edit that down, and it's always a challenge for me each year. Like that's my personal artistic thing that I will release until I'm tired of it. So, but I'd say currently right now I'm working on a full show that no one has seen, like more sculptural work and painting. I'm like disciplined, so I'm staying with like within a strict color scheme. There's some pages I have from and everything's a single edition. They're shot from all over the US. It's a series of Polaroids. And then I sell the Polaroids online to fund future projects. So all fine art work that I sell in my studio just later goes to fund a new zine by myself in collaboration or someone's solo project. And I love art book fairs and interactions. And honestly, we do like 15 to 20 a year. I was taking the last couple months off to focus on a magazine, but we'll be releasing a book by Zach Greer that has been a pain in my butt to put together, but it's photos from the Bob Miser Foundation, done with Zach's drawings. It'll be really nice. I work with a couple different printers. This Live, Love, Laugh, the one you just saw, is printed in Vegas. Zach's book is printed in Minnesota. This year I'm focused more on hand object books, like limited 10 editions of 10 and physically made by the artist. So.
And I'll also say that, Kyle, you were the last studio visit that I was able to have before the pandemic shut everything down. So
yeah, you've seen it all. You know what it looks like.
Yeah. One person has actually seen the work.
Yeah.
And I can totally attest to the massive amount of work that you're doing and putting out there. And also, I've seen Zach's drawings over these photographs, and I can also share my excitement for that book. So I can't wait for that to come out.
Yeah.
I have one more question for everyone as a group that we can kind of tease out a little bit. But I think we are going to have to move on to the question and answer section in just a few minutes after that. And Kyle, you had mentioned moving around a lot. And I think that's true of everyone on this panel. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about your relation to location and geography in terms of your work. I always think about, and I talk about the book as the book form as a space, both conceptual and architectural. And it does also speak to geography. I wanted to hear some of your reflections or thoughts about how place affects the work that you're producing or publishing. And I can ask an even more leading question because, Kyle, I know that your magazine coming up is supposed to be like a New York magazine.
Yeah. I would say New York is like the best place I've lived so far. I loved Colorado, and it had a real punk scene, but there wasn't a real queer community. Minneapolis has a really great queer community, and everyone was active and enjoyed, and every place goes through phases. I started Raw Meat Collective in Providence, Rhode Island, which was one of the worst places I ever lived. And then it opened up a bunch of doors for me to get this collective going. Like, I worked with galleries. I was coming to New York every 3 weeks. I had a curator that was helping, just listen to everything, and we would talk and brainstorm and have all these things. I would say I love New York a lot. Right now it's terrible, obviously. But I feel like there's not a magazine strictly for New York's I wouldn't say nightlife, but I wanted to cater to contemporary fine artists in the vein of after dark, but not performance. And less high-end people, but more contemporary fine artists, but free range and a lot of fun. I want to showcase exhibitions that are coming, and that's harder as this is all developing with COVID and everything. It will still now in September, but yeah.
Kyle, I have a question about your magazine.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in, you want to make a physical magazine.
Yeah,
they're
expensive
website.
and they're long, but it's worth it. Yeah, and there's no New York. I mean, people can say that Gay Letter is a magazine for New York, but I think that's a lie. Doesn't cater to everybody. There's not a magazine that caters to every single person. Yes, I want it to be in New York, but we can also feature West Coast artists because we're there all the time as well. It's just a curated New York-centric magazine. So.
And to bounce back to Julia, you've also lived several places before, being now in Chicago. I have one of your zines specifically about Baltimore. How are you navigating space within your publication work?
I mean, every publication is definitely a reflection of where it was produced. And I specifically form relationships with libraries, regional libraries, wherever I'm at, because I want to know about the places where I am and the histories of where I am and how they inadvertently influence my time in the region. So a lot of my publications involve either bits of information or iconography of every region that I'm in. I mean, I've traveled due to residencies around the United States, so that's really helped. But I mean, all of my narratives are definitely a product of being on the road for a really long time. And I don't know if I'm quite settled down. I'm sort of getting the bug or the itch to move again, but we'll see, because I'm starting to reflect on that practice of being a transient, and did that really help my career? Like, I'm really trying to analyze whether or not that was what I should have done. But thinking about it now, maybe it was great, because I've got so many remote communities all over the United States because of this now, that like Christopher, that's how we met, it was just on the road. So I'm still reflecting on that, definitely.
I also wanted to follow up with one more question. You mentioned forming relationships with libraries, and you did recently a residency that was, if I'm saying it correctly, you were performing bibliomancy in the library. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That's something that I was fascinated by and wanted to ask you more about.
So I definitely have an affinity for libraries. Libraries are safe spaces. They're safe spaces for me as like a femme-bodied transient individual. Like, I could go to the library to use the bathrooms, to ask questions, and to figure out which parts of a city that I'm like newly entering were safe for me to be in. So libraries are safe havens for me, and I just find them fascinating. Like, in the demographic of people that attend libraries is fascinating as well. It's a public service. So the bibliomancy sessions, I was trying to figure out a way to insert myself and my artist practice into these spaces so I could continue to make libraries a part of my professional practice. And I pitched an idea to the Columbia College Library to do bibliomancy sessions. And they let me do bibliomancies for a full year in their facilities, which was wonderful. And what I would do is I worked with a specific grouping of books from that specific collection at Columbia College, and I would invite patrons of the library to come into my office, and we would talk about either foreseeing the future or forecasting the present through the use of books. That's what bibliomancy is. It's like a divination process involving books. And of course, I'm interested in magic, so combining both my interest in magic and my love for libraries into this bibliomancy practice is definitely something I want to keep doing.
Good. Yeah, I just really love that you were doing that project. So thank you for telling us a little bit more about it.
Sure.
And Leah, same question to you about geography and place. And of course, like, the Internet Art Book Fair is kind of unmoored from a specific location, but you yourself are not.
Correct. Out of necessity and happenstance, I've had opportunities to live in different places. But I think, Julia, to your point, the opportunity to be in different places and to work in different places actually just expands the network. For me, the act of publishing and my connections that I've been able to make through the book community, book artist books community has kind of let me be wherever I need. It helped me wherever I need to be. It's definitely so much of a community-driven kind of network. I feel like we're so often supporting one another, buying books outright for one another or from one another, trading. The act of trading feels so natural. Kind. Wait, Kyle, did you say kind?
I said punk.
Oh, it is punk. Yeah.
And it is kind. Yeah.
And it is kind. It's kind and punk. The placelessness of the internet has actually it feels totally conflated right now. I mean, Janelle, I just keep thinking about how you were saying that this situation has actually kind of fostered such strong connection, and just the intimacy of being able to like see into people's homes and to feel, if like someone's cat clomps along the keyboard, or it's pretty unique. It's really special. It's like exhausting and terribly human. But I don't. So to that end, I guess as far as place and geography, I think I'm actually less. I don't feel very constrained by my placelessness. Maybe that's a form of acceptance that I've come to it.
Oh, thank you. I'm just looking at the time, and I think that we're just where we want to be to open up for audience questions. And we do have a number of questions pulling through, and I'll start reading from the top. Our own Don Russell asks, as publishers, are there particular analog values that you would want carried forward into the digital age?
I'm gonna just respond quickly and say quality is a value that I always strive to have part of my work. I usually handle all of my publishing because there is an element of analog production that I find digital doesn't always represent. Not saying that one's better than the other. I'm just saying like analog has a certain feel, and that's the vibe that represents my lifestyle. I don't know if that, Don, if that answers your question, but quality, I would say analog quality is a value that I continue to practice.
I'd say that there's an opportunity for sensitivity in the digital format. Things like promoting intimacy and vulnerability through a digital format can actually be possible, and it's not just because we're like in this situation. Ways to perhaps use time and subtlety in the digital format. I think all of those things are actually still possible. Those are things that I always look for in analog objects. I handle things with care, or try to, and I think if you seek it out, it might be there digitally too.
Yeah, I would say it's just about working with the current times and adapting mainly. I would say I'm come from like a fine art mind aesthetic where I made this work before the internet and I'll make this after the internet. So the internet's a phase. But I do understand how our work is going directly into that, and we have to deal with it. And this is how artists make work. They sell art. Like I have collectors who only follow me online. And since like my first account, I have published a zine with a monthly party here that is now weekly, like 4 or 5 times a week. It's NYC Inferno, and it's just a casual hangout party, and that has adapted into Zoom parties. So it is nice to see something that was so physical and intimate go into a digital aspect, and everyone can still connect without losing any sort of connection. But I will say the internet is a very difficult place at times.
Thanks, everyone. Next question is from Robert Goody. Says, I've always thought of Grace as a publisher, but of course we also have a curatorial function. Kyle talked about giving his artists free range because he felt so edited in his life. I wonder if each of you see yourselves as curators as well, and if so, how you strike that balance between curatorial and editorial and publishing.
Yeah, I mean, I am a curator. The collective does at least one physical show a year, as well as like libraries where we show full books that are no longer for sale as other ephemera that's no longer available. Yeah, I'm a curator, as well as a publisher, as well as a painter, photographer. These are just different outlets, and publishing is one that has been doing decent so far. Um, we even have an online show coming up in like 3 days called Midnight Moon that features 18 different artists, and not taking a cut and letting artists list their own work personally, describe themselves, and have connections with people through raw meat itself. I see every single person that is in publishing as a curator.
Yeah, I definitely recognize that I am curating, like specifically with QTVC Live and who appears on the show. I curate a lot of people that I have a previous rapport with, because we've worked with each other, we know how to converse with each other. But I'll be starting the next season of QTVC Live, and we'll be curating a new lineup with people that are less close to me. I think my curatorial practices strive to not be gatekeeper-ish. I don't seek to silence creative voices, but I do seek to uplift underrepresented individuals, mostly of like Latinx identity. So it's definitely a fine balance. That's a great question, and I'm continuously having to navigate like what that fine balance is.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that sentiment of the realities of being a curator in addition to all the 17 other things that we happen to be or do. I will say, in regards to the Internet Art Book Fair project, I've been kind of hesitant to call myself a curator there, although I'm certainly doing curatorial work to organize and manage the projects. I do like to think of myself as a collaborator with the artists, in that I just am trying to like work to execute their project however they want it to exist on the site. So maybe we're all like curators, like asterisk.
Curators and
Facilitator, I would say, like curator facilitators.
I tried the term proprietor of the proprietor of Internet Art Book Fair. I don't know. You can comment in the chat if that works or doesn't.
Well, thank you. We have another question from Chad. He says, I'd love to hear thoughts from the group on distribution, digitally or otherwise. It seems that publishing and distribution go hand in hand. I'm curious how the active distribution through publishing has affected other parts of your practice, whether that be teaching, making, promoting available works, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's a nightmare. I think it's like one of the hardest things to get established, and really meeting people at art book fairs is the best way to get distribution and to get into libraries and to get into collections and to meet people because they physically want to see your work. I have like tried to get European distribution, and you have to spend so much money and have so many editions, and you have to meet so many criteria. They have to see your books. It often takes like 2 months to even hear back, yes or no. So it's okay. It depends. Like some places want to carry more exotic things, and then some want the items that you're like, why do you want this?
That's kind of like the age-old thing at the book fair, where I found the not always, but there seems to be no formula. The thing that I think won't go is first to go off the table and sells out immediately, and the thing that I'm most excited about, I'm just like, oh, but look at this one, is like just still stacked up. I think ultimately distribution is best one-to-one. An opportunity to like meet with someone and talk about the work it's a valuable, it seems like a valuable experience for both maker and potential customer, collector, reader.
I'm just going to add that I think the work that I produce, I don't know if this is the cases for Leah or Kyle, but the work that I produce acts as like it attracts sort of what I put out there. And so all the people that have bought my work from years back are still in my life and are still like supporting my career in a really interesting way. Even if it's just a zine, a lot of these connections, a lot of this clientele that I've accumulated has become my collector base in a really bizarre, totally unexpected way, because a lot of that collector base is like rooted in punk and counterculture. And all of a sudden we're getting older and establishing our careers. And I just hit the jackpot with these people. They're really awesome.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. And we have another question from Sarah. For those of you who work in other media as well, can you talk about the role that artist books play in your larger body of work? Are there certain ideas you feel can only be in books, or different approaches you take if an idea turns into a book versus a painting, etc.? I'm going to kick this over to Kyle because, again, I was just in your studio and it was filled with all different variety of things.
Oh yeah, I was rereading the question. I would say paintings are very difficult to put in a book. Everything has to be properly photographed and shown at true color. So these things just like sort of take time. Like they develop in phases where it's like, I have this entire body of work. And sometimes I have artists submit certain things and they're like, well, what do I do with this? And it's like, okay, well, we need to edit down at least within a budget. And you have to pick pieces that fit the project, fit the budget, fit the book itself. Obviously, not everyone's work will make a book for certain reasons, but it just really depends. I would say larger body of work take time. Like Zach, you saw Zach did 25 drawings and it took him like 3 months. It's really difficult to ask an artist to make 85 to 100 pages of a book. The 20 to 30, they're like, I'll have it done in 6 months. But like, if you ask them to do like 100 pages, it literally takes them like a year.
Yeah, I think in regards to like how my artist books function as like a component of my overall art practice, it's just like I think very much rooted in kind of my training and education as a printmaker. I think a lot about how in learning printmaking and learning different print processes, I would often fail at each image making technique, trying to figure out what the best type of image was best for what process, right? So like that as like a specific example, like also then has ramifications and kind of branches out into like a larger practice. So like maybe an idea or sort of a conceptual concern is not actually well suited for an artist book, and I'll try to make it into a book and it just sort of crumbles and doesn't really actually like function. It's clunky, but it needs to be like a video or a series of drawings or maybe a sculpture. It's just a matter of sort of teasing out the idea and seeing what sticks. Yeah, behind the concept, right? And like, and a bit of trial and error.
Yeah.
I mean, my studio is mostly filled with failure.
I guess the one thing that book arts and zine making, I think those two sort of go hand in hand for me, is portability. Like there's paintings, drawings, you know, especially for those who are more transient. Like art books is the majority of my collection because I move around so often. So art books have something that other mediums don't have the capability of doing. I think other mediums can exist in a book in their own way, however that is, but books are the most portable in my opinion, other than digital works though. Digital works is a whole different ballgame.
Thanks. I think we have one final question for the evening from Nick. And this is, has interaction with readers changed a piece of work or how you work for you?
Yes. Yes. When I was younger, I would definitely write sort of more off the cuff, um, and now I am being more accountable with what I put out in the world. So yes, having a previous interaction with readers where maybe I was a little not as responsible as I should have been with some of the things that I wrote. Now I'm being more accountable and trying to be more intentional with everything that I put out.
I have strong opinions, so I welcome all opinions about my book, or any book that I put out. And I love feedback, and I like brainstorming and hearing people's thoughts about my books. Every artist book has different viewpoints from everybody, but it's a timeline of what's going on. And it's like the most current work, and every artist that Raw Meat works with is a current producing artist. Yeah, I would say like it's funny to see people's interactions with the books that sell the best. Like some are really in collections, they're really well like liked, and a certain amount of people enjoy them, but it's the least selling book. And then the like most selling book is one that's like $10 for no reason, that's made really like, you know, weird, unique, and awesome. So it is. I say it fluctuates all the time.
Yeah, I would just say a lot of the reason why I make art and why I make books is actually to connect with people, and I value any interaction. If anyone wants to give me their opinion and to spend time with my work, that's really meaningful for me. So yes.
Yeah, everything we do creates conversation.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. It seems like you don't have any more questions for us tonight. So before I kick this back to Janelle to close us out, I just really wanted to thank you all for spending time with us here today, both our audience and Leah and Julia and Kyle. Thank you so much. And thank you, Grace, for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for everyone for coming.
Thank you, Christopher, Leah, Kyle, Julia. This has been such a treat. There was one last question that came through directly to me, and I also had the same question. So I'm going to ask, and then I will segue out of the program. But this is from Janet Rems. She's one of our board members, and she's asking, as someone who prefers to read physical print books, what do you think is the future of this type of publishing?
I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's only getting better. I think we'll all keep producing physical works to share and distribute. If we can continue teaching the methods to make books for future makers, they'll continue the process.
I do believe books will become more expensive though. So I recommend collecting now if you get the chance, like starting your collections now, because I do believe that books will not go away, but because the processes are so time intensive, that prices are going to go up. So
yeah, I don't think it's going away at all. People love to read.
They do. Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Well, again, this has been really fascinating. You know, I feel like I learned personally a lot about the book arts community. It's not every day that we hear from book artists and small work makers. So bravo to the work that you're doing, stretching the boundaries with what the general public sees the book to be and what it can do. So thank you for sharing your current works, your thoughts, your processes. There is a great deal that goes into what you're doing that I don't think we have visibility to all the time. So it's been an incredible treat, again, having you here tonight. So I just want to remind the audience about the other Velocity of a Page programs we have coming up this month. So this time, next Thursday, we will hear from Sarah Osborne Bender, who is the head of Library Technical Services at the National Gallery of Art. Really excited about that. She's a specialist in artist books, and she will be discussing the exhibition. So please don't hesitate to join us at the same time next week. And then the following week, which is May 21st on Thursday, we'll have Rex. Both Sarah and Rex are with us tonight. Thank you for joining. And Rex is a performance artist who will be performing a creative response to the exhibition, which should be incredibly fascinating. All of these programs are free to attend. Again, thank you to the support of the Reston Community Center for funding these programs. I encourage you all to please visit the artists' websites. I've dropped them again into the chat. Their Facebook handles are there, Twitter, Instagram. Don't hesitate to stay in contact with them. Also, please sign up for our newsletter, for Greater Reston Art Center's newsletter. If you are not already engaged with us, we have a great deal of virtual programming coming up within the next couple of months. So definitely some exciting projects to stay updated on. Again, we always are welcoming new members to our organization. Your generous support makes a direct and meaningful impact to our exhibitions, our education programs, to funding the artists to participate with us. So if anyone has any questions or wants to stay in touch and with general information, you can feel free to email info@restonarts.org. Anyway, I want to thank you again for joining us this evening, and thank you to the artists, thank you to Christopher, and everyone have a great one. Thank you so much.